Hey everybody, welcome back to the Unstoppable Deep Dive series. I'm Diana Chen, your host, and I'm here today with Andrew Rosener. He's the founder and CEO at MediaOptions, which is the #1 domain brokerage firm in the world where you can buy and sell traditional domain names. Today, we are going to be talking all about the value of blockchain domains in the long term, and there's nobody better I can think of than Andrew to join us and talk about how he sees the value of blockchain domains being in the long term. So welcome, Andrew. Thanks so much for joining me for this video.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Of course. So to start off, I just want to know a little bit more about your personal experience with blockchain domains. So maybe walk us through, like, do you own any? How many do you own? Which ones? Like, how did you go about thinking about which blockchain domains to buy?
Okay, so let's see where to start. So we do own a variety. I'm not exactly sure how many, but I do know that we own at least, my name. We own all of our company brands, which we have quite a few sort of sub brands of our companies: DNX, Media Options, Domain Sherpa, real estate. All kinds of different businesses and brands. And I think the reason we bought those is obvious. It's number one, brand protection. Number two, and more importantly, is sort of as an on-ramp for what I believe will be the future of these things, which is payments and identity and a variety of let's say embedded services that are not possible, or at least not feasible, in the current legacy DNS system. And so, I think at first it was more of like, okay, we should, we've got a tremendous portfolio in the legacy root, .com space, and it was sort of we should hedge, that with emerging technologies. And then as I began to learn more and sort of utilize these things, I began to understand, and I was early in crypto, and so this wasn't totally foreign for me. But as I came to understand sort of how this market was developing and what the utility of these domains was going to be, it became obvious that, like, okay, well, I mean, we certainly are going to be selling domain names for crypto in the future. Wouldn't it be convenient and also just, obvious to own our brand dot crypto or dot, whatever comes in the future? Particularly other things that make even more sense, but for wallets, for identity, for connected services, with a lot of the other decentralized services and on-chain services, etc. And so yeah, I mean, it was just like, yeah, of course, in the same way that you think about, of course, I need to go out and get my .com domain name. It was sort of course, I need to go out and get my blockchain domain names. It's just, that's, obvious. So, yeah, so that's what we did.
Awesome. So you mentioned some use cases for blockchain domains today, and I guess the two main ones that at least we like to harp on here at Unstoppable is, one, it makes payments, sending, receiving crypto payments a lot easier, because instead of sending a crypto payment to a long string of letters and characters, your public key, you can just send it to andrewrosener.crypto, and that makes it so much easier. And then the second one is for building decentralized websites, which, like right now it's still a little bit limited in terms of accessing decentralized websites and then what websites you actually see on the decentralized web. But like you said, in the long term, this is going to be the new normal that we live in, is going to be Web3, as we're making the shift from Web 2 to Web3. So other than those two, would you say those are like the two main use cases you think of too with blockchain domains, or am I missing anything here?
Well, I think identity is a really, which is a component of websites. But when I think about identity, I mean it more from the terms of like single sign-on, data protection. So both on a corporate basis as well as an individual basis, I think that the future of web navigation will be domain name driven on both ends. I think that it will be domain to domain connectivity. So I navigate with my domain name as my proxy, and in some cases, sort of, I don't want to pretend like this is my ideas. I'm sort of riffing from ideas that I've taken from Balaji Srinivasan, who talks about how we will likely have sort of our transparent, identity, or our real identity, so to speak, and then we'll have a sort of pseudonymous proxy. And so maybe I'm, I don't know, whatever nickname I decide, um, you know, uh, is my, that I'm on forums with, that I'm on social media with, that I'm signing into other websites and third-party applications with. And sort of that proxy is like, okay, look, I'm verifying that I am who I say I am. My data is baked into the domain name in some form or another, and there are many ways of doing that. And then all you need to do is like capture, in the same way that sort of email works today, like capture, DNSSEC. Um, basically I'm signing that this is me, and so you can trust that this is me, but you don't need actually my data, right? And so that's really the way that it should be. And that will completely upend the way that monetization on the internet works, going from, taking people's personalized data to maybe a more use-based approach to monetization. And so that's exciting to me, actually. It's probably the most exciting. But on the payments front, it's interesting. It's like the basis for the domain name system in the first place was simply that. It's like, this is nothing new. This is really just a sort of new take on the reason domain names were created in the first place, which is humans are not good at memorizing long strings of alphanumeric characters. And so instead of remembering an IP address, it's like, I'm just going to go to Amazon.com, right? And so it's like, instead of memorizing a 24 or 64-bit alphanumeric address for a wallet, it's like, just send it to drew.crypto, right? Um, uh, by the way, you want to send me some crypto, send it to andrewrosener.crypto, not drew.crypto. But we got to figure out how I get drew.crypto though. But that's just like, that is the basis for the domain name system. That is why we have domain names. We're really bad at memorizing long strings of alphanumeric characters, so why not shorten into something that's just like, intuitive? And so, yeah, I think that's going to be a very powerful use case. It's going to create less loss and error in payments, and just overall smooth out the whole P2P payments infrastructure.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's something that we'll definitely see being a use case in the long run as well. When thinking about the long term, because, right now where we are with blockchain domains is sort of where we were with .coms and traditional domains in, I want to say maybe the early 2000s or the late 90s. And so it's sort of
Probably
hard to
mid
envision
mid 90s. Yeah, I'd say mid
maybe
90s.
okay, mid
I
90s.
don't think we're that far along yet. I think that we're like in the early mid 90s, 94, 95, 96, just at the crest of consumer internet sort of coming into the mainstream. Like I kind of, in my head, I generally use like 97 as sort of the turning point of like, let's say every home in America sort of was like, oh, there's an internet. I could get on it. I'm not necessarily choosing to be a first mover in this thing, but I'm aware that this exists. Okay. And I think that's where we are. I think we're like 90, but we're maybe like just before that moment. Like, if you were to ask the average, I don't even want to say the average person, because, there's still like people that aren't even using the root, the legacy internet. But, if you ask the average netizen, okay, if you were to ask the average netizen, like, okay, do you know that there is blockchain domains, and do you know what they're for, and would you know how to use them? You're going to get a 99% response rate, no, or maybe 80% no. And so that's opportunity, right? We're early. This is very early. And so I actually think, look, in this day and age, everything is compressed. Timelines are compressed. Things move much faster than they used to. And so even though I think we're probably in the 93, 94 period right now, if we're making that analogy, I think that we'll be at that 97 aha moment where the whole world says, oh, okay, that probably happens, over the next 12 months. And, um, and then I think the 99, 2000, 2001 moment, that sort of explosion of okay, was that just a fad? Is it over now? Um, that will happen too. And that will come, I think, when we start running into some of the collisions with ICANN and, which to Unstoppable's credit is not so much of a problem for you guys as it is for some of the other blockchain domain name services. But I think that will be a very important moment. I actually, it will be disruptive and it will be problematic for many and will create a lot of unclarity. But it's a very important moment that we're headed towards that I think will be that sort of tipping point. And so, outcome undetermined. But yeah, I think that's sort of the trajectory that we're on, and I think that's sort of the timeline if we're looking at that analogy. And I think, like I said, it all gets compressed. Like I think that if we're at 93, 94, we're going to hit 97 in the next 12 months, and we're going to hit 99, 2000 in the next 2 years. So
Well, Andrew, let's talk a little bit more about that. So as we're approaching this, 97 and 2000, 2001 sort of era, if we're making that analogy, how do you see this playing out in the long term? Like, let's say 10 years down the line, or maybe we don't even need 10 years because, like you said, the timeline is probably going to be more compressed for this era than for the Web 2.0 era. So let's say like in 5 to 10 years, what role do you see blockchain domains playing? Like, what use cases do you see being out there for blockchain domains to help people understand more what is the value of blockchain domains in the long term?
yeah, so it's not clear. I mean, there's a lot of different directions that this can go. And I think that the outcome is going to be less determined by the existing players in the blockchain domain name space, and more determined by the reaction from the legacy system to that. And what I mean by that is, so as we see like ICANN roll out in 2022, I believe, or 2023, when they start rolling out the next round of TLDs, there will be inevitable collisions, okay? And that will sort of be the first inning of, or let's say that'll be the first fork in the road of, okay, we could go this way or we could go that way, right? And so, I think there will be a lot of nausea, but ultimately, as the name implies, it's unstoppable. You can't just delete it, right? There is no delete. And so, at some point, the world realizes that, and I do believe that the legacy system will not understand that to begin with, right? They'll be like, fly on my shoulder, swat, 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 and they'll realize, oh, wait a minute, but they don't go away, and then it's simply because it doesn't matter what you do. It's a blockchain-based domain name. It exists in perpetuity, and that's it. End of story. So the next chapter, the next fork in the road, sort of comes with that aha moment of, okay, these things are here to stay. And so I think that the next fork in the road is actually twofold. One is on the sort of social, cultural, political side, and that is like, does this whole cancel culture thing perpetuate? If we continue down that road, I think that the next chapter of blockchain-based domain names comes sooner rather than later, because of the demand, the requirement for it, the need, the social need, the political need, or anti-political need, perhaps. In that event, if we perpetuate this, if we amplify this cancel culture, this corporate activism against a certain view or perspective or belief or voice or whatever, if we continue down that road, at the highest of levels, meaning ICANN, registry operators, registrars, if we perpetuate that, blockchain domain names are going to emerge in the mainstream faster than probably most of us even believe. Because all it takes is one big entity, one big canceled voice to adopt it, utilize it, amplify it, and then follow on culture, right? That's just how it goes. And so that could happen sooner rather than later if we continue down that path. The second fold is the more corporate sort of systematic one. And if we say, let's say let's say that, cancel culture and this sort of politicism of everything and sort of divisive culture, it does not perpetuate. Let's say that it was a fad, which unfortunately I don't believe. But if it is, and we can get back to love, peace, prosperity, then I think that mainstream emergence for blockchain domain names takes longer, simply because there's less, let's say, absolute requirement, right? There's a want and a desire, but primarily among sort of hobbyists, enthusiasts, activists, less in the mainstream. Okay, and so it continues to be a bit more nascent. The technology develops, it's a nice, keeps on chugging, and eventually, emerges in that sort of 5-10 year time horizon as, let's say, an alternative, okay, a parallel internet, an alternative to the legacy. But I think when we get into that 5 to 10 year window, my guess is that in 10 years, if I'm being honest, I actually think it might take longer than that, just because these legacy systems move very slowly. I've been part of several ICANN working groups, and I can tell you that small changes take 3 to 5 years. And so, this it's a big ship that doesn't turn quickly. And so I think that it could take longer, it could take 15 years for them to sort of recognize the superiority of a blockchain-based DNS system, which I fundamentally believe is superior. The only concern I have is conflict resolution. I think that, and I don't have a proposed solution for that, but I think conflict resolution is an overlooked element of blockchain domains that needs to be resolved in order for mainstream adoption. You will never get corporate adoption. These are my customers. I know the way that these people think. I know the way the IP attorneys think. I know the way that the lobby groups around advertising, advertisers and such. There needs to be a form of mitigation, of conflict resolution for trademark dispute. And so trademark dispute and content abuse. So things that just shouldn't be available. So despite that I am an absolute free market capitalist, but there are certain, let's say, elements that need to be scrubbed. So I lost my train of thought, but I think that at some point, whether that is 5, 10, or 15 years from now, I think that, assuming that mainstream adoption is not forced because of need and demand due to some of the things we discussed, I think that the sort of organic, natural selection process will result in ICANN, or, ICANN, which is meant to be ground up, right? But I think the voices of the participants that make up the internet body, the pipes, the plumbing, will ultimately understand and give into the fact that this is a superior technology for managing this stuff. And I think that particularly the architecture that Unstoppable has is very interesting for potentially becoming the new VeriSign, basically becoming the new architecture for the legacy root, right? I think that the most likely outcome is that at some point the legacy root adopts this new architecture, and we just see a peaceful transition from legacy architecture to blockchain architecture. And I think that's the best outcome. Even if it's not happening at the pace that some of us might like. I am an investor in Unstoppable. I would love to see this happen tomorrow. But my point is that I think that is the best outcome. Is that the legacy root recognizes the technological superiority and ultimately adopts this as a new framework architecture. And I think that we'll actually start to see some signs of that, some experimentation in that realm sooner rather than later, perhaps in the next 12 to 24 months, where you may get some independent legacy root zone operators, TLD operators, who say, well, we'd like to offer a parallel namespace on this architecture, or we would like to actually operate our TLD on this architecture, or there are various ways of sort of experimenting with this, and I think that we're going to start to see some of that experimentation, like I said, sooner rather than later.
Yeah, that's super exciting, and that love the insights that you just provided. That was way deeper than I've even thought about it. So, I mean, I love that, and I think it's obviously like if anybody out there has experience in um, predicting how quickly this will move, it's you, because you've been in the industry of traditional domains for so long. So last thing, let's leave people with this. What can people do today to make sure that they're positioning themselves at the forefront of Web3 in 10 years? People are looking to buy a blockchain domain. Like, how should people think about this? Should they go out and get their name, their first and last name, or should they go and get other domains? Like, how should people be thinking about this? And what are actionable things that people can be doing today?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, start with the obvious, the low-hanging fruit, and that is like own your name. Like, should have done that in the legacy route. You should certainly do it in the blockchain route. Um, own your name, play around with it, utilize it, and figure out what these things do. Begin to even if you do understand it already. If you do understand it, you probably already own it. But if you don't own it, you probably don't understand it, right? And so, get your name, start there. Okay, first, last name, .crypto or .whatever. My hope is I hope to see a lot more domain extensions emerging, and so people have more options. But get your first and last name, start there, right? And then you should own, what are the things you're interested in? What are your business names? Like, that's an obvious one, right? And anywhere that you would want to accept a payment, anything that you would want to use in order to navigate. Like, if you weren't going to use your real name and you wanted to sign in somewhere, you don't want somebody using your data. Even if that's not the world we're living in right now, imagine that world and think about how you'd want to navigate, and then go out and register those domain names. Whether it's your nickname, whether it's some forum name that you use often, whether it's your social media handle, whether it's, like I said, your business name, whatever. You got kids, like, this is probably going to be a world that your kids are living in, like natively, right? So, maybe think about that now and get them their domains. These things aren't going anywhere, right? And so I think that's the place to start, right? And then, like I said, I think more than anything, play with these things. Have somebody send you $5 in Ethereum, and send it to your wallet, and see how that works. I mean, it's like magic, It's like, send $5 in Ether to Andrew Rosener crypto, and it shows up, and you're like, wow, that's so cool. It's like, back in '93, somebody sent you an email, and you're like, whoa, it's hard to believe today, but like the fact that somebody could just, from China, from Russia, from anywhere on the planet, they could just send you an email and you get it in real time at the speed of light, minus some, middlemen. That is nothing short of a miracle. And the fact that we can now do that with money, I don't know. I'm biased, obviously, but like, for me, that shouldn't be understated. It's like, that is a miracle. The fact that, like, we can, in real time, P2P, no intermediaries, just send each other money to a blockchain address, that's freaking crazy. And if you don't think so, you're sleeping. Like, if you don't understand the implications of that, you're like, what are you doing? Go bang your head on the wall until you understand it. Like, this is exciting stuff. And so, just get a name and have somebody send you $5. Send it to yourself. But this is really important stuff. It's really important technology. And whether there's winners and losers, or one infrastructure versus another, is really irrelevant. It's about understanding how this works, what are the implications of it, and where are we going, right? And I think, at a very high level, I think we sort of outlined most of sort of the outcomes that could come about. And but I don't really see an outcome where these things are a zero, right? And a lot of people say like, well, it's been tried before. There's been so many other things, but this is different. A lot of the problems that we had before have been solved. Number one. Number two, a lot of the problems that we have today didn't exist before, which creates demand and need that previously didn't exist. And so those are both very powerful impetus for change and disruption. So yeah, I think that's where to start.
I love it. I love the enthusiasm, Andrew. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your market analysis and forecast. I think it's going to give everybody a lot to think about, and encourage people to go out there and at least, snag your name, maybe your kids' names, your family's names, your business name, those things to start and play around with some decentralized apps and sending money and things like that. So thanks again, Andrew, so much for being here. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll be back soon with another episode of Deep Dive.